Hi, everyone. Good evening. Happy Thursday to you all. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining this live event. I see a bunch of you are joining. Earl, Gib, good evening to you. Thank you for tuning in. Elsie, Gladys, I see you. Miss Nyakoa, Karibu. Please invite your friends and family, only the ones you like, please. Especially those who are keen on real estate investment matters, just so that we can have as many people as possible getting the information that they need. Thank you, Fahali Group, again. I see you. Rachel Morab, Jerry James, Karibuni sana. Lizzie Karaoke, welcome. Sharon Makio, thank you for tuning in. Welcome. I guess I'll give just a couple more minutes for as many people as possible to join before I get into today's topic. Again, we've been doing this on a weekly basis just to be as available as possible to answer questions, address all manner of topics, subjects, and issues around land investment, particularly real estate, but with a focus on land because that's our specialty. I am Solomon Wangwe, the founder and CEO, Managing Director of Goshen Acquisitions Limited, as well as its fully owned subsidiary, Grand Acres. And I'm happy to see all of you tuning in. Grateful that you would make time. We don't take it for granted. And today's topic is basically going to be about the sale agreements. I'm going to be running through some of the things you have to look out for as you prepare to do a sale agreement. And if you have questions along the way, please post them, comments, share. I will dedicate 15 to 20 minutes of this 1 hour towards the end to answer any of your questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question, by the way. If you're curious, if you've had problems before, if you're unclear about something, please go ahead and ask. We've been doing this for 12 years here in Kenya. We know something, a thing or two about sale agreements, property transactions in general. We have sold thousands of acres, bought and sold thousands of acres in different parts of this country. That's hundreds of transactions that we have been a part of. So we do have some relevant experience in this, and we've done it well. We've never been conned. We've never lost money here in Kenya around this. So anything we can share with you to help you be better at making land investments back home, we're happy to do. Okay, so I'll just get into it. I see all of you who have joined. Thank you so much for tuning in. Mercy, Maeve, Binti Kebadi, Lex the DJ. Good to see you, Lex. You're such a champ for following us and being part of our community every time we see you. Joe Okabi, M. Guono, Wagmaya, I think that was the spelling. Zona Mabati, Sami Kialo, I see you all. Thank you. So let's get into it for the sake of time. So the topic for today has to do with sale agreements. If you have bought land in Kenya before, you should have interacted with this document that we call a sale agreement. But before we get to the sale agreement, you would have to have done a number of things before you have to be concerned about the sale agreement itself, what it says, and so on. And in case you haven't heard yet, we did a an absolutely free checklist for safe land buying in Kenya. It has 9 steps to safe land buying in Kenya. It's an absolutely free download on our website, www.grandacres.co.ke. You want to do yourself a favor. Why wouldn't you take that with you? It's been prepared by myself personally, based off of years of experience buying and selling land in Kenya. Like I've said, hundreds of transactions, thousands of acres bought and sold. We only sell what we own. We're not agents or brokers. That means at some point we're buying land in order that we have inventory to sell to our customer base at some point. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is based on a hardcore experience. It's not theory. Okay. And like I've said, we've never been conned, so we know something about doing it right. So before you get to your sale agreement, if you download that free copy of your checklist, 9 steps to land buying, safe land buying in Kenya, you'll have gone through step number 1, which is to define your investment goal. You need to know why you're buying the land that you're looking at, because not all land is equal depending on your purpose for it. If you're looking for agricultural land versus commercial space versus land for a factory and such, you will need to look at different types of property, different locations. Zoning becomes an issue there. So know your purpose. Otherwise, you'll be flying blind, wasting a lot of time and money and energy looking at things you shouldn't be looking at. Okay, so define your investment goal. Step number two is scout for your land as much as possible. And I know this is difficult for those of you in the diaspora. You want to spend time looking at the land physically. There is no substitute for a physical land inspection. And if you're not here back home uh, to look at the land, send someone you trust to look at the land for you. More than that, they need to be competent. They need to have the knowledge in order to make an accurate assessment of what they're going to be looking at on your behalf. So don't just send your shosho or your neighbor because they're available. Send someone who knows something about investment, especially if they've invested in land before. Okay, very important. If you can't do it yourself, send a competent person to do it for you. No substitute for it. There's things you will understand when you visit a site that no documentation or video like this will tell you. The energy of the place, the vibe of the place, there is such a thing. Just because everything checks out does not mean it'll be the right place for you. You need to have that connection, that X factor, that emotional bond to the land. That's how you that's part of what I just mentioned when you meet the seller in person. Step number 5 is negotiation. You need to agree on the terms of engagement. pricing, how much deposit to pay, how much time you need before you pay the balance, what documentation you require from them before you finish paying or buying the property and such. Step number 6 is hire a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya. You cannot do a property transaction in Kenya safely if you're not using a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I always use that term. It's very intentional. They are licensed to practice. Just because they say they're a lawyer doesn't mean that you should work with them. They need to be licensed, and not just that, the license need to be valid for the year that you're engaging them. So it's 2023. Any lawyer that you're working with needs to show you a license from the Law Society of Kenya, a certificate to practice. The license is issued or renewed annually. So if they show you one from 2022 and they don't have one for 2023, do not touch them at all. I don't care how many years they've been practicing. If something happens as they are advising you, you're left out in the cold because you are working with an unlicensed professional. Very important. So identify one, preferably one who has experience in conveyance law or conveyancing. That's a technical legal term for property transactions, commercial property transactions, right? So don't work with someone who just focuses on litigation or intellectual property or whatever other class or specialty there might be. Make sure you're working with someone who interacts with property transactions on a daily basis if possible. There is such a thing as specializations. Work with a competent licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Okay, step number 7 is sign the sale agreement. And this is a topic for today's discussion. Before you sign a sale agreement, you will need to have received all the documents I just made mention of from the seller, identification documents. If you're buying from a company like ourselves, Goshen Acquisitions or Grand Acres, we will have provided you copies of our registration certificates, PIN certificates, and any other documents you might require, CR12s, CR8s. Ideally, you want to have your licensed advocate obtain those for you as opposed to relying on the ones we give you. It's very easy to do today. They go on eCitizen, they enter their particulars, and they are able to access those documents from the company registrar to confirm our identity as is current. Very important, okay? So what are the things that need to go on a sale agreement? First thing, obviously, is the specific reference, legal reference to the property, the title number, the land reference number, the land registration number, as you may call it. That has to go on the cover page of your sale agreement, always, because you have to be specific about which property you are interacting with the seller for, especially if you're working with a company like ourselves. When we may have hundreds of properties on offer at any given time, it can't be general. You need to reference a specific property that you're looking to buy, okay? That goes on the cover page. Second page will typically have details of either party, that's the seller and the purchaser, postal address, ID number, if it's a company, company registration number. Always be very specific. The details is where people go wrong. If we provide you our name as Goshen Acquisitions, but reference a different company's registration certificate number there, we have just introduced a very small technicality that could render you powerless in the event of a dispute, because we could claim you did not pay the right company or you misreferenced the company and that sort of thing. So pay attention to the details, again, why you need the competent services of a licensed advocate. Another thing that will go on there would be the size that you're purchasing. If you're subdividing land from a larger block of land, that needs to be stated very clearly in the sale agreement. If the piece of land you're buying does not yet have a title deed, like happens from time to time, even when we sell. So we've been doing this for 11 years. We have a lot of customers in our database, our community, our Greater Gains community members is what we lovingly call them here. at Grand Acres. Very often they will want to secure a good deal from us before we have title deeds ready, because they know that once we have ready title deeds and we go marketing to the public, the prices are generally higher. So they can get a good deal by pre-buying or buying off plan. I'm sure some of you have heard that term. This is a very risky thing to do. I will be the first one to tell you, even though we sell or pre-sell very often, you can't do it unless you absolutely trust the other party and they provide you certain checks and balances to protect your interests. What we do as Grand Acres generally is we receive the funds into an escrow account managed by the lawyer who issues professional undertakings, which is basically a promissory note that states that they will not release the funds paid to us before the title deed is ready, and that they issue permission for them to release funds to us. This way, our buyers, our customer base are able to secure a good deal before title deeds are ready. Now, when the title deed is not ready, you still have to reference some sort of property. In this case, you're going to reference the mother title that we are subdividing the plots from. Has to be in the agreement. If you're pre-buying, it needs to say that they are buying a plot of land known as parcel number whatever that we have named it in our subdivision scheme, and is being excised in favor of the purchaser. Being excised means in the process of subdivision or separation from the mother parcel. But it'll always reference the mother title. I don't know if you can see that. That's an example of a mother title reference, Kajiado Kaputier South /2964, right? That's a mother title that we have subdivided plots of land from. This particular buyer purchased before the title deeds were ready and the subdivision was complete. So very important that you pay attention to the details, right? It will also reference the LSK conditions of sale. Make sure your sale agreement always makes reference to Law Society of Kenya's conditions of sale, 2015 edition to be specific. Okay, 2015, make note of that. If you're not sure, find a licensed advocate yourself, ask some questions. They'll give you an example of one. Probably what we might do, is share one of these as a free download for you guys to get from our website, just as an example. Don't take shortcuts and try to copy paste this, because it's not going to be specific. Sale agreements are very specific to the details of any particular transaction. So don't copy paste and try to do a transaction on your own. That's foolishness, that's lazy, and you should get flogged for doing that if you do. A licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya will draw one for you. And when they do, and I'll show you an example of this, this was prepared by one of our favorite advocates that we use a lot. We've used him for years. We first met him because he was a customer. He and his chama of lawyers bought land from us. I think it was in 2015 or something like that. And out of that grew this relationship where we started to give him briefs or work to do for us. And we've been using him since. So I don't mind showing you his details, right? You can see that's AMM. He's the one who prepared this particular sale agreement. And a licensed advocate, a good one, will always put their rubber stamp on a sale agreement like that, right? Don't take shortcuts and try and download the free one we're going to share with you, just so you have an idea. Hire an advocate to do it for you. Important thing it will also state is the price you're buying, who the advocates are specifically for either party has to be mentioned in the sale agreement, okay? Along with that, it will also provide for what we call completion documents. Completion documents are the list of all the documents required from the seller before you as a buyer can finish purchasing or releasing funds to them directly. It's very important that you understand what these are. They are actually listed in our checklist, 9 steps to safe land buying in Kenya. You can go to our website again, that's www.grandacres.co.ke. download your free copy of the checklist, 9 steps to safe land buying in Kenya. It lists what we typically consider as completion documents. I will tell you right now that our list is generally longer than most other sellers or buyers. And this is based off of years of practicing this. We know what documents are an absolute must and which ones that other people don't really care to ask for or provide that are actually very important for you. So get our checklist and you'll have that available. Another detail that will be included in your sale agreement is the account details for where the money should be sent. Very important. Sounds like a small thing, but if I sent money to an account that the seller provided to me, say on WhatsApp or on email, even on email, and the ones that were provided on the sale agreement were different, a snaky, crooked, thieving person of no integrity, if they are the seller, or the buyer could claim that they have actually sent you money when they did not, or that they did not receive money while they did. So make sure that the details of the bank account are listed. That's what this is. Branch name, account name, branch code, bank code, SWIFT code, everything. And make sure you send the money to that particular account and get SWIFT confirmations and receipts and all that. Everything has to tie up together. If you're sending by M-Pesa, which is typical these days, especially for the more affordable plots, 50 by 100s that everyone in the social is selling today, nothing against 50 by 100s as long as you're buying legally, properly produced ones. And I've done videos about this. You can check out our website for more resources on that. Even when you're paying by pay bill, have the pay bill specifically written there, as well as the account number that you're entering on M-Pesa. Very important detail. It will also contain a stipulation of the time period that you have to have paid your money, your completion period, right? Very important. Don't leave anything to guesswork. It will also make reference, a good sale agreement will make reference to something we call Law of Contract Act. And I'll just read this one for you just as an example, okay? This one in particular is clause 6.1 in our sale agreement, and it reads the following. Each party hereby agrees and confirms for the purposes of the Law of Contract Act, that's chapter 23, Laws of Kenya, that it has legal capacity to enter into this agreement, and the director that has signed is a respective party and does so pursuant to a resolution, a board resolution from the company, especially when you're buying from a company like ours. This is what this is making reference to. And clause 6.2 states, each party hereby agrees and confirms for the purposes of the Law of Contract Act, chapter 23, Laws of Kenya, that it has executed this agreement with the intention to bind themselves in the contents thereof. They sound like gibberish to a lot of people. It's two simple clauses which could save you a world of pain, because these are, I think of these like teeth in a mouth, right? All these clauses to me, I think of as teeth in a crocodile's mouth. That's a good analogy. The more teeth the crocodile's mouth has, the better for me. Because if the other party misbehaves, I can take a big chunk of flesh off of them, and I can be made whole. If my crocodile's mouth does not have enough teeth, meaning some of these clauses, then what good is a toothless crocodile, right? It can chomp down as hard as it can, but it will not draw any blood, it will not tear off any flesh. I know that's a graphic metaphor to use, but you get my point, I hope, right? So you want to make sure you are as protected as possible to weed out any jokers in the process. It will also have penalties stipulated in the event of either party defaulting. It will have certain warranties that the seller should provide you about the land itself, its physical state at the point that they transfer it to you or give you possession. What happens later in the event of us as sellers misrepresenting certain facts, like, you know, part of the land belonged to the government because it was a road reserve or something of the sort, a wailing for electrical wires and that sort of thing. These will all be stipulated. There's going to be a few other clauses in there along those lines. One I'll focus on is the force majeure clause. Force majeure is a French term for actions beyond one's control. Force majeure, right? And I'll just read this one for you as an example. This is typically clause 12 in our sale agreements. It says, clause 12, force majeure, clause 12.1, the parties shall not be liable for any failure or delay in performing any obligation under this agreement where such failure or delay is due to any event beyond their reasonable control. Okay? The parties, meaning both sides. So this covers both you and the other side. Whether you're buying or selling, this covers both parties. And I'll repeat that. The parties shall not be liable for any failure or delay in performing any obligation under this agreement where such failure or delay is due to any event beyond their reasonable control, including but not limited to without prejudice to the generality of acts of God, civil disturbances, terrorist activities, wars, strikes, pandemics, epidemics, or widespread quarantine. Those last four are super critical because up until 2020, these were missing in our force majeure clause. And so in the event where we had mass government shutdowns globally because of this force majeure situation, many called it an act of God. I disagree. I don't think God had anything to do with that ugly situation. But in any event, it was an event that was beyond anyone's reasonable control. If you did not have pandemics or epidemics listed there, then you're a little bit exposed. Okay, so another reason you need to work with competent advocates. This is now a standard clause in all of our sale agreements. Clause 12.2 reads, the parties would, however, be expected to resume performance as soon as reasonably practicable after the reason or event preventing or delaying performance ceases or abates. That means that once that situation is done, both parties are still expected to fulfill their obligations as stipulated in the sale agreement. That means time paused for whatever reason, government shut down, but once that is done, can we please conclude the transaction? It's not a question of just leaving anything hanging inordinately or indefinitely. So very important clause. I just wanted to point that or single that one out amongst the many other standard clauses that you'll find in a typical well-drafted sale agreement. And finally, usually you will have on the last page the signature fields. And this I'll focus on if you're buying from a company or selling to a company. If the company has more than one director, depending on what the company's memorandum and articles of association say, you need to have every party that is supposed to sign the agreement. Why? Because if it requires two signatures but you only have one, that sale agreement is effectively non-binding. So if the memos say that formal documents must be signed by two directors, then make sure you have two director fields, signing fields on that sale agreement. Again, sounds like a simple technicality, but that mishap could render your whole transaction null and void. And one could claim that I am not bound to the terms of the sale agreement because it's not legally binding, because it is not consistent with the memorandum and articles of associations that give the rules and regulations for who is supposed to sign on behalf of the company to obligate it to any legal agreements. I hope that makes sense, guys. And of course, there'll be a signing field for yourself if you're the purchaser. So these are some of the critical things you want to make sure are in your sale agreement. And in some rare cases, you will have schedules, as in the case of this one. Any attachments or annexes to the sale agreement that are part of a clause that is stated in the sale agreement but requires more details would typically be added after the signature field as as an appendix or a schedule. In this case, because we promise our buyers that the fee or the amount that they were paying for the land included legal costs, legal fees, and stamp duty, uh, all inclusive in that case, we actually went ahead and stipulated exactly what each of those costs are, right? And it's included as a schedule. This is actually the last page of our sale agreement. I don't know if we can share that, if we scan that, but hopefully you can get a clue. In this case, we created line items. We never leave anything to ambiguity. We never tell you that price is inclusive of legal and stamp duty without you knowing exactly what those costs are, because that has an implication on what you're actually paying for the land. Okay, so that's what that would look like. Any other pieces of documents that would be relevant to the sale agreement that should be evidence of a term or a clause in the agreement should always be included as part of the schedule. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that has made sense for you as far as the sale agreement is concerned. Again, work with a licensed advocate, a conveyancing advocate, ideally, to help you prepare your sale agreement. And I should add here, once your sale agreement has been signed by both parties and witnessed by the advocate for both parties or either party, always insist that the sale agreement goes to RD House, Ministry of Lands headquarters, where it shall be franked, right? I hope you're catching that. Franking is what we call it. And this is, this basically means there's an officer at the RD House who will receive the sale agreement. It must be in no less than 2 copies, otherwise it cannot be franked. You need to provide at least two copies or in duplicate. Triplicate is better. In some cases, we actually do quadruplicate. We take all 4 copies of the same agreement, fully signed by all parties and commissioned by the advocates. You pay a tiny fee. I think it's 40 bobs or some silly amount like that. The highest one I've seen was 120 shillings. And they stamp it usually in red ink. And that basically means that it has been authenticated as a real document, original copy of a document signed by multiple parties in agreement to a transaction. Why is this important? Because a lot of people don't do this. Even good lawyers sometimes will skip this step because their clients don't ask for it. It can take a little bit of time, which means you might wait a few extra days to actually receive a copy of your binding sale agreement. But the reason we like to do this, and it's a standard practice at Brand Acres, is because in the event of a dispute, or whether present or in the future, randomly someone came and claimed that you actually didn't buy the property, someone else did, you can present this sale agreement as admissible evidence in a court of law with competent jurisdiction in Kenya. Otherwise, it could be seen as a suspect document, and the court does not necessarily need to accept it as bona fide evidence of a real transaction. So that final step is very important. Do it for now, do it for the future. It costs nothing, maybe just a little bit of time in a few days, because sometimes the franking machine is not working at RD House and you have to wait longer, or whatever the case may be. But always make sure you have that done and you have foolproof evidence of a legally binding document that protects your interests as well as the other parties. I hope that makes sense again. And I think at this point, I'll just open up to any questions you guys might have about the sale agreement or anything else about land investment, and we will see if we can answer those for you. Okay. I see one question here from Justamam Kenya. Question: is there an average number of pages a sale agreement should have? And is digitally signing a sale agreement law? Well, there is no average number of pages, Justamam Kenya. It just depends on how many clauses you insert in there. It depends on the size of the font that the lawyer who's preparing the sale agreement uses to print the agreement. If they use big size font, obviously the agreement will take more space than an agreement with smaller size font. The formatting has a lot to do with how many pages you have in the end. So no, there is no average number. Important thing is all your interests and the other party's interests are accurately captured as both of you have agreed. If it's 10 pages, fine. I've signed sale agreements that were 42 pages long, right? So there is no average number. And digital signatures, thanks in a weird way to COVID. In March of 2020, our parliament passed a raft of amendments to various acts, particularly the Business Act, which allowed for the first time in Kenya for digital signatures to be legally binding. Before this, digital signatures were not acceptable by Kenyan law, but COVID forced that situation, obviously because they were trying to minimize physical handling of paperwork to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So now it is still legal to sign documents digitally, and they are legally binding. Obviously, there's measures you have to take with your digital signatures. You need to control who has access to your digital copy of your signature, because if I gained access to it, I could use it to sign all manner of documents that could put you in hot soup, right? So short answer is yes, digital signatures are law. Let's see if we can have any other question. There's a question here from GK Gaming. Hi, if I'm buying land from you, can I come with my own sale agreement? Yes, provided it has been prepared by a licensed advocate of the High Court of Kenya. We will subject it to review by our advocate and make comments, obviously, to make sure that our interests are also covered. But yes, you can come with yours, but generally speaking, the practice is that the seller or the seller's advocates prepares the sale agreement for the transaction. But hopefully that answers your question. GK Gaming, thank you. That's a great question. See if we have any other questions. I see one here from Mercy Maeve. Is a sale agreement a final document, or one must have a title? I'm not sure I understand your question, Mercy. Sale agreement simply contains the rules of engagement between both parties in a transaction, a property transaction in this case. I'm not sure what you mean by final document, but either way, there has to be a title deed. In fact, if there is no title deed, whether a subdivision title deed or a mother title deed, then the sale agreement is not worth the paper it has been printed on, right? So those are two separate issues there. They go hand in hand. So make sure you have them both, Mercy Maeve, and thank you for that question. We have any other question? GK Gaming, you have another question. What if I am buying land with a life partner? Will we have to be included in the agreement? Well, that would be up to you, GK. Whether or not they are included in the agreement is not as material. But as a matter of best practice, especially when I'm buying land from individuals, even if say it's a man and his wife, or a woman and her husband, she is registered on the title deed and the husband is not. Technically speaking, she is the one who has to sign the sale agreement. The husband doesn't have to. What the husband has to do is sign a spousal consent affidavit. That's a requirement in law today. Anyone selling land as an individual needs spousal consent to sell that piece of land. Otherwise, the Ministry of Lands registrars are not supposed to allow or effect the transfer of that property. As an extra step, I generally make the spouse or spouses, because in some cases we're buying land from members of communities that do practice polygamy. And we've had situations where we're buying land from a Maasai gentleman who had 3 wives. And we ensured that all 3 wives, even though they were not listed in the title deed, witnessed the sale agreement as well as issued spousal consents. It's just a good precautionary measure to take to ensure that there is no chance in hell, because that's a hellish situation if it ever happened, that someone could come along later and say, oh, my spouse sold the land without my consent. Oh, we didn't know that he was selling family land and that sort of thing. Get every adult person in that family, including children. We've done that. We've had children at the age of 18 and over also witness the sale agreements to make sure that we've covered all our bases. So my team member here is asking me to check on Instagram, right? Scrolling. Okay, I'm scrolling. Okay, I see one other question here from Mercy Maeve. Like, if you're acquiring land for the first time, thanks for answering. Okay, I guess this is a follow-up to the first question about the sale agreement or the title being the final document. I think I've answered that, Mercy. Thank you for your question. I see another question here from Emilia Mbaire. If I'm selling land and the buyer wants the bank to fully do the payments, what should I do? Well, Emilia, if that's a situation you're in, you have to make a call about whether or not you want to deal with the modalities of selling to someone who's requiring bank financing, because bank financing is a very specific process. It takes time. What they call loan perfection, for them to release funds to you on behalf of their borrower, can be time consuming and may not suit your needs as a seller. So just be very clear from the very onset exactly what your needs are and whether or not the bank's requirements for timely release of funds to you are aligned, right? Because typically speaking, they will have to send a valuer first. That valuer may not agree with your selling price. And then you all of a sudden have a fight between the bank and the buyer about how much they're willing to finance, because banks will typically only finance a percentage of the valuation, not your asking price. Very rarely do bank valuations agree with asking prices, I'll tell you that. Banks, especially in Kenya, are generally allergic. I would say they like to avoid land financing. If you're buying land to build, they are a lot more flexible to work with. But if you're buying land, especially for speculative reasons or purposes, banks don't like to touch them. So when they do, they will have very low valuations to begin with. And at the most, they might give you 50% of that low valuation. And then your buyer has to be able to raise the balance on their own. So these are details you have to discuss with your buyer before you engage. And just be clear that your interests are aligned, particularly on timelines and matters that have to do with valuation. And this has to do with your asking price. So I hope that helps. That's a great question, actually. I see another question here from Mercy. Mercy, you get the award for most questions today. Thank you. These are great questions. And your third question, or fourth question, I should say, is like, if you are acquiring land for the first time, thanks for answering. I guess this is a continuation of the other, right? I don't see any other questions on IG. Okay, I see one more. Hadi Group. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you guys wherever you are, Delaware, here, there, everywhere in the US. Thank you for tuning in as always. And your question is, why is it that the closing documents don't include the land green card? Okay, that's a good question. Well, the green card, for starters, is a document held by the Ministry of Lands. It's under lock and key in a file presided over by the registrars. It's a very important document because the green card essentially is what gives birth to your title deed. So how I think about, or how I explain what a green card is, if I was to use an analogy, for you as a human being, if you have a national ID, right? Your national ID would be the equivalent of a title deed to a property. The green card to a property is the equivalent to the birth certificate for the human being. Which one comes first? You can't get an ID without a birth certificate. Likewise, you cannot have a title deed be produced or exist unless there is first a green card. And this is the document that we always advise people to do part of their due diligence on. Don't just do a search on the title deed. Go ahead and ask the registry for a certified copy of the green card to that file or that property, because then that way you have full historical disclosure about when that title deed was created in the first place from its mother title and so on. Now, why this closing document do not include the green card is because most people don't even know that a green card exists. Even lawyers, for whatever reason, will not tell you much about a green card, even though they know it exists and why it's important. We generally always obtain a certified copy of the green card ourselves. And the reason that you may not want to include it in your closing documents, especially as a buyer, is because you do not want to rely on the buyer's, or I should say the seller's representation of that green card. You want to obtain yours on your own, right? Get your lawyer to obtain one for you, which is your constitutional and legal right to do, as opposed to asking me as a seller to provide you one. Why? Because there's an obvious conflict of interest. If I'm trying to sell you something and it's a bad deal, the last thing I'll want to do is present all the facts to you. So if you ask me as a seller to provide you a copy of the green card, certified copy of the green card as part of the closing documents before you paid me, there's a good chance I will falsify that document, which happens a lot. So best thing for you to do as a buyer is obtain one yourself. You don't need to rely on me as a seller to provide you one. Therefore, it's not necessary for you to include it in your closing documents as a precondition for completion. After all, it's one of the documents that your lawyer should obtain for you when they're doing due diligence for you. I hope that makes sense, Ahadi Group. That's a really great question. Let's see. How much time do we have left? I think we have 10 minutes left. We can cover a few more questions. I see another one from Just a Mom Kenyan, last one. And your question is a letter of offer somewhat included in a sale agreement? The contents, that is, they seem similar. So a letter of offer is the initial approach that people take to engage in a land transaction. It'll generally have an overarching view of the terms that you want to be bound by, primarily the identity of the seller and the buyer, the asking price or selling price, the deposit amount, the balance amount, and the period of time that the balance should be paid, along with any other preconditions or conditions precedent that you may want, like doing a survey, getting searches done, and that sort of thing. Now, very often, a lot of those terms will be repeated in a sale agreement. I guess that's why you're asking that question. So yes, it's not unusual for some clauses from the letter of offer to be included in the sale agreement, and that is absolutely fine as long as there is no variation in those specific clauses. But those are strictly two very different documents. They are not the same thing. So a sale agreement cannot contain within itself a letter of offer. The letter of offer is a separate agreement from the sale agreement. The sale agreement simply formalizes in greater detail the overarching terminology that was covered in the letter of offer that then formalizes the kickoff of your transaction. I hope that helps just a mom. If you have any more questions about that, feel free to reach out to us directly on WhatsApp. Send your question to 07 001 You can see that scrolling just below me, and I will personally engage with you if you want more details. We can even have a call tomorrow during work hours, and I can provide you more details. I see another question here from GK Gaming. Thank you for answering the questions. My last question is there a difference between leasehold and freehold sale agreements? What should I look out for? The answer is no. The only difference, I suppose, is the title referencing. But there is no material difference between a sale agreement for a freehold versus leasehold. Freehold, leasehold title deeds are different. Intrinsically, they mean different things. But as far as the sale agreement goes, the clauses can be exactly the same. What matters is the title reference details that go on the sale agreement. Okay, GK Gaming, I hope that helps. I see one question from my favorite Los Angeles native or resident, Washu Ndirangu. Yay! Hi, Washu. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, I'm sorry, it's 7:53 p.m. in Kenya. We actually have only 7 minutes left before we have to end the live event. But thank you for making it anyway. If you have any questions, please send them through. Let's see, do we have any other questions on IG? I don't see any. I don't see Ndindi. Nope. What is she asking? Or he asking?
Can we know when to raise concern during a land buying transaction for the dealers who are not genuine?
Can you know when to raise concern about a land transaction with dealers who are not genuine? Yes, you can, by following the 9 steps to safe land buying in Kenya. Guys, I have been singing about this for years. Just go to our YouTube channel on Land in Kenya. There's north of 300 videos, I think. I'm not even sure. I lost count. I've done hundreds of videos about this particular issue, amongst many others. So if you follow your due process before or as you buy land, it is virtually impossible for you to get toyed around with by unscrupulous sellers or dealers. Download the 9 steps to safe land buying checklist. It has everything you need to know to flag any issues right from the beginning. If you get conned after using the checklist that we have provided to you for free, absolutely free, then the sun will have stopped rising. I'm fairly confident about that because these are simple steps that you can take that are very difficult for one to do unless it's the government of Kenya itself that is trying to defraud you. Okay, so please, simplest way to answer that question is download the checklist. As you follow those steps, you will be able to flag any dishonest land seller or dealer immediately. And when you do, disengage and deal with someone else. Don't try to fix it or accommodate this, that, or the other. Absolutely not. It's not worth your hard-earned money and time. Show respect to yourself by doing it right and demanding that those you're transacting with do it right, okay? And if you have any questions specific to that, again, reach out to us. Our WhatsApp number is on the screen, 07 0001001, and I will be happy to engage with you further. I see a comment from Alexander Mutuku. Hello, thanks for this, Solomon. You're most welcome, Alexander. Thank you for tuning in and for being. And I hope you're learning something new or something important that will help you along your investment journey. Do we have any more questions, guys?
Kimani Njoki on Instagram.
I see Mercy Njoki. I don't see Kimani Njoki.
I'll read it out for you.
Okay.
Can you sell or transfer land if holding a share certificate, or do you have to wait to get the title?
Can you sell or transfer land using a share certificate, or do you have to wait until you have a title? Okay, technically speaking, it is possible to transfer land through share certificates, but practically speaking, I avoid anything that does not have a title deed. It's absolutely not worth the risk. Anything that does not have government issued title deed that can be independently confirmed by a practicing advocate or a third party is a no-go zone. So if you're trying to sell land through a share certificate, all the best to you. Hopefully you do what is right for your buyer. Okay, because I would never do a transaction like that. It's not worth the risk. Please process your title deed as quickly as possible so that you can deal transparently with the other party. The other party cannot do a search on a share certificate. Okay, it's impossible for the other party to do any meaningful sort of due diligence other than taking your word for it. And that is not a good way to go about buying land. It's actually a foolish and a risky way to go about it. So process your title deed, provide your seller something meaty and meaningful to transact with, and all should be fine. That's my 2 cents. Any other question? Okay, I think we've gone through all the questions so far. For all of you with your questions, thank you so much. I see you, OP Mrembo. Thank you for tuning in. Many days. We look forward to seeing you back in Kenya when you can. All of you, thank you so much for tuning in. We're most grateful. I love to have these conversations where we can share our experiences with those of you who are looking to make investments in land, in real estate, in property back home in Kenya. Anything we can do to enrich that process for you, we're all game. It's what being Kenyan brothers and sisters is all about. Check out our YouTube channel, Own Land in Kenya. You can search that on YouTube, or you can search Goshen Acquisitions on YouTube. It'll take you right to our channel. Hundreds and hundreds of videos on how to go about buying land safely in Kenya. You can go to our website, www.grandacres.co.ke. You can get a ton of info about our own products, what we're doing, what we've done in the past, what might be coming up even from time to time. You can also download your free checklist, 9 steps to safe land buying in Kenya. Avoid getting conned. Avoid the problems that come with opacity and do it right. So thank you to all of you, and God bless.
Hapa nilikuja bila kitu na sitoki bila kitu, mwanangu azaliwe na kakitu, usitoke bila kitu. Aye, kila siku naishi kama sina kitu, mwishowe miliwe na kakitu, akisitoke bila kitu. I wanna make a home with you, I'm putting all my hope in you, and I could be anywhere in the world, but home is where I